Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to take a look at silent renews. So a silent review is a way to refresh your token on the client side, and we'll just not necessarily implement a token refreshing, but we'll just implement a part of that. We'll also, if we have time, implement the user profile stuff, again some part of it, which will set us up for the next episode, and we'll also tweak the login forms a little bit. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll start with the login forms, so we'll do a little bit of CSS first, then we're gonna go into the silent refreshing stuff. So getting to this client side, let's go ahead and I don't know why I opened the DevTools there, but I just want to duplicate this because, and by the way, the silent refresh stuff, the stuff that I was talking about is, if you go on here with being signed out on the identity server side, you will see this login required stuff, and we'll go over when this gets triggered. So on here, what I want to do is I just want to log out, sign in, get on the login page, and here it is, right? The bastard child. We need to give him some love, you know? And primarily what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of the stylings that we have here, and I'm going to transfer them across, okay? So let's start with the input form. For a start, I'm just going to grab all of it. I'm going to start removing some stuff as well. So we'll go on the layout. We'll go on the input. We'll put everything here. We'll remove the width. The flex stuff, I don't think I need it. So that's just going to make the whole thing just a little bit bigger. The padding, you will see here that it sort of starts right at the beginning. I'm actually going to say 4 pixels. I want to move it from the side because what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a border on this. So border of 1 pixel solid, and the color that we're going to start with is the black that we have on the background, right? So we're reusing the colors. And then I'll just copy this whole thing and I'm going to put it on the focus. And the reason I'm going this like this without checking is because I practiced before this episode, and if you want to do small iterations, go for it. I don't want to waste too much time on this. This is styling work, and I don't think it is that important for the totality of this tutorial and what we're doing. So let's just get this part over with. The other thing you can see, it's turning to this color, kind of like focusy color. So that's what I want to do. We'll steal this color and we'll reuse it elsewhere as well. So once we focus on the input, let's go ahead, put this here. And let's quickly take a look at what it looks like, right? So refreshing this, there we go. Let's go ahead, and you can see here, this is actually the black outline. So we want to get rid of that, and the font size as well, we'll increase that a little bit. So on here, let's do font size. We'll go 16 pixels. We will do something for the label as well. Let's go ahead and point this to the label. We'll do font size. We'll actually make it smaller. And font weight, we'll put bold. Okay. So increasing the input here, the outline, we want to get rid of that. So outline none. And let's go ahead and see what this looks like. Okay. There we go. So you can see this nice little outline that we have. Now let's round the borders and do the same thing for the buttons down here. So let's go ahead and border radius, we'll just add 5 pixels here, and then coming to the button. So let's go ahead and log in. I've decided to actually change everything to login and register. We're not going to go the sign in, sign out route, okay? And the register will say create account because that's what I have decided. We'll put an HR. And we'll put this on a separate row, okay? Again, styling work. If you're feeling a different vibe, go for it. Otherwise, you can follow what I'm doing. And again, I'm gonna start putting timestamps on these, so if you want to skip over certain sections, they're in the description. So the button, I'm gonna make it outlined. So for the field, well, we only have one button, so it's okay to put it like this. Background color, none, transparent. And I think some of the styles I can grab from here. So just in terms of the size that they use. So here we have it, basically, I think. Height 36, min width 64 pixels, padding 0.16. Background color none. Let's do border radius 5 pixels as well, and the border will be flat out. Just is this our no, we want the blue color, and I'm marking it blue out of focus because when we're sort of focusing on the input field, it has that blue color, so it's kind of like it's the path. It's like sort of, if you think about like all the choices that they can make on that screen, I'm marking the choice that they should be making with the similar color essentially. So that's just the, and this blue color is essentially that color where I'm going to be like, this is where you should be going, okay? And one thing on the field, because we'll have a link there as well, let's just do text decoration none. Okay, I think that would be okay. Let's see what this looks like. I think from what I practiced, yeah, the HR is going to be a little bit, you know, neglected. And actually can't remember exactly what I practiced this with, so let's open the DevTools. Let's go find this little dot. Where is it? There we go. So width 100%, and yeah, I think that was it. Yeah, I can't remember. I did something with colors there, but that doesn't really matter at this point. So with 100%. One thing that I also wanted to do, because I removed the title on there on the layout, what I actually wanted to do is put the title here and just put the name of the actual platform that we're signing in from, because the sign in screen is apparent from the login button. The create account is gonna pop us to the registration screen, but that's pretty much it. And typing this out, yep. Let's see, let's save this, let's give this another hard refresh, go to create account, register, let's remove the title on here. And one thing, you can see this button's floating here, but that's because we just haven't moved it to its own, what's it called? Can't type and talk. Moved it to its own little div. Okay, so now that should be dropped down, and one thing is sign up, so we are going to change this to register, okay, as the action that should be performed, and back to login is back to login, right? So there it is. You can see the tricking library here, hiding, kind of stealth mode, right? So on the body, what we're going to do is we're gonna flex direction column, everything else pretty much centers everything. So all that's gonna do is move it up there. But the thing with this is I want this to be white color, so it actually displays on there. So let's go ahead, set the color to FFFF and make it a little bit bigger. So font size 32 pixels. Okay. And another thing with this form is that I didn't like is the, how would you say it? The way that this shows up as well. So you can see that it's a little bit cramped from what I'm seeing. So what I did to the form itself is on the padding side, I just increased it a little bit so that it would expand a little bit. And what I did is I said, right, your maximum height should be 300 pixels and, sorry, not height, width, right? So the width that it's going to occupy, and the width is going to always be at least 300 pixels. And I did put some margin on the side as well. I think it was 1 rem. So let's go ahead, refresh, and see how this looks like. And the primary thing that we're gonna notice here is if we take a look at it, and it's actually going to be a width of 364, which is just one thing when you are not using a CSS framework or anything like that. You can see also it's like kind of squishing it weirdly. So what we want to do is on everything, let's go ahead and say border box, I think it was. Why did that one recognize? Border sizes, or box sizing? Yeah, box sizing. And this will pretty much basically say where on the cube, which of these are we going to use to essentially determine as the border of the element, right? So we want box sizing and we want border box. Okay, so that's going to be on everything. Let's go ahead, give this a hard refresh, see what this looks like now. Okay, so now the actual thing is 300. You can see the input is no longer bleeding out, and if we well, make it smaller, it's working a little bit more, you know, as expected. So here's the input form. Again, if anybody is a CSS master or design master, message me on Discord. We can work on this together. But nevertheless, for now, I'm happy with this. Let's go ahead and proceed to solving the error that we had here. So if I hard refresh this, and I haven't actually signed in, but essentially, let me go ahead and replicate the error, right? So we sign in, so we're signed in on both sides. So essentially what we do is when we refresh, not much else happens, right? So if I go on own localhost 5001, let's go ahead and go to the applications, and what we're going to do, I think, is this all our cookies? Let's go ahead and refresh this, and we'll, okay, so you've seen there, a login required, but that's essentially it here, right? So a couple of things that we can do here to inspect is the network tab. So you will see here what happens is we have our application loaded, and then we have the check session that's happening, right? So where is this actually coming from? And this is this iframe that a lot of people don't know about. This is how a refresh happens on the browser side, right? We spawn an iframe that is invisible. So you have your SPA application, and then there's an iframe in that application. And that iframe visits your identity server because the cookie is there in the browser. It is able to authenticate with the authorization endpoint and pertain new codes. So this iframe takes care of refreshing your access tokens, right? And just because of how the OIDC client library works, it does it on first load as well. What we're going to do first is we're going to make sure that we are not getting this absurd error, and the error that we're getting, we can actually capture it and, you know, feel it, take a look at it. Where is it actually happening? Because the way that it's actually happening is we have the auth plugin, and I shouldn't really be going too deep into this because this is not specific to our application. This is just about the technology itself, about the library. If we go into the plugins in the constructor here, if we take a look at the actual source code and the implementation, if we have a monitor session, if we set that to false, this error goes away. But it's not specifically what we want to do, because the actual error doesn't go away. And so let's go ahead and bring this in. Just know that that option is kind of like a flag. When on startup, it will go and check the session. And the actual thing that we want to enable it to do is if we go to our static pages, OIDC client, and the sign in callback, if we just copy this, paste this, and what we'll do is sign in and call the file silent. Okay, so it kind of is identical. I don't know what that thing is. Let's get rid of that. But sign in silent callback. The thing that we actually want to do is we don't need to redirect after this. The settings can be empty. And we want sign in silent callback. Okay. And this is the same way that we get redirected from our identity server to the login page and then to our application. This doesn't need to redirect back to our application because we don't want our whole nuxtjs application being loaded inside the iframe, right? So it kind of stops just there, and the actual iframe is controlled through the OIDC client library. So now that this is happening, now that we have this page that the iframe can land on and actually have the correct callback as well, that means that it's going to actually raise correct events in our plugin, okay, to which we can hook in instead of crashing on our page over here, okay? So let's go ahead and configure everything to basically land on this page, okay? So let's go ahead into client init. We will copy the redirect URI. So where it's landing on sign in callback, we will uncomment our sign in redirect URI. our silent redirect URI. We'll post this here and we'll add silent callback. Okay, let's go ahead, copy this full URL again. What we'll do is we'll go now into startup, and on our redirect URIs, we just want to make sure that we add this as another URI that we can redirect to for silent refreshes of our tokens. Okay, so now that we have this configured, let's go ahead back here where we'll refresh this. Okay, we no longer get the error. There is, however, an error on the other one. I think this is just a error because the backend was refreshing, right? So okay, so actually we are in the correct space. So we're still signed in, so it still thinks we're signed in. However, we don't get the token, we don't get the error anymore. So kind of, it was giving us an error before, it doesn't give us an error anymore. It doesn't mean that we like solved the fundamental issue that's at hand, that we're not handling the logout that has occurred. We just haven't seen it, right? Because we can log out here, but we don't have a logout session back there. So the primary thing that we want to do is synchronize the state. Okay, so let's go ahead and check how we can do that. So because now that the user manager is correctly landing back on the goddamn wire, I have to take my hand out to wave around and explain stuff and then put it back on the keyboard, and there are wires here from the microphone. Let's do this, right? So we're correctly landing on the iframe, right? We're redirected back, and what this will do is it will make the user manager spawn an event now. So if we go into the user manager, you will see that we have some user manager events where we can actually add handlers, right? And here are some events that can occur. And one of the events is silent renew error callback or user signed out callback. And if you take a look at the oidc client implementation in the library, it's actually quite well laid out. So let's actually do this because I think it's kind of useful. A lot of people, I don't know, everybody says open source, but then how do you look at the open source stuff? So let's actually take a look, right? So we're going to go into SRC, and for the user manager, what we're going to do is we're going to actually take a look at how this occurs, right? So this should occur in the constructor. So this is TypeScript, or I think, is it TypeScript extends? Yeah, I mean, it looks a little bit like TypeScript, but it is a JS file. So still JavaScript, right? Anyway, we have a constructor. And if we go down, we check some settings, we go to the super, so it passes it back to the class. We have some events, silent renew service, right? So we get a silent renew service. And then this bit, if we have a setting set automatic silent renew, this is where we start a silent renew. And the other thing is if we have the monitor session, we add a session monitor constructor here, right? So we add a session monitor. So we can take a look at where this is being used, right? And if nowhere, we want to take a look at what this session monitor is, because we actually turn the flag on and off. So it grabs a new session monitor. We can take a look at where the session monitor is. So in this file, so I think this will actually I don't know if this is some kind of navigation, but I'm going to go back to the, to the folder here. And I'm actually just going to find it on my own. So silent renew service, or no, session monitor. Okay, so that's the one that we want. Let's go in here, and again, in the constructor, this is where a bunch of stuff is happening, kind of like the user manager that we get past here. So if you remember, the only parameter that we pass is this, then the type, timer, and ultimately what it will come down to, as I don't want to step out through each line, but in the end, it will call this start function, where if I can copy this, okay, there will be a start function inside here. So this is kind of how I traverse the source code, right? I see, okay, so this is being called somewhere here. Let's go ahead and find where this is in here. And then there's going to be a big if statement. If you hit it, some of this stuff doesn't matter, but what we want to understand is what kind of events is it going to throw. And the most important bit is this callback, right? So Again, not going over every line, but it will start the session iframe check where it will pass this callback to execute once the whatever in the iframe happens completes. And if we go back down here again using the same method by control where's the callback, we have that callback here, and we want to find out what events is it going to throw. So we have raise user signed out, raise user signed in, and we have raise user session changed, right? So these are the 3 events that could potentially be thrown, and all of the conditions, I mean, you can see in the source code, if you step through these line by line, you will know the particular condition that we are interested in is the raise user signed out. So user sign out callback, this is the event that we want, right? So let's go ahead, close everything, and on our user manager, let's do it before we inject it. So user manager events, add or user sign in, no, add a user signed out, and the callback that we want is console log user signed out. Okay, so at the moment, again, small iterations, just make sure that what you're doing is kind of confirmed in your head. So you have some kind of theory, test that small theory. Don't start changing everything and making further plans. Just make sure that the initial steps you take towards solving the error are actually the correct steps. So now in terms of the synchronization part, let's go ahead and grab this. We're gonna go into our auth store, and where we get the user, let's console log user gotten. Right, let's refresh this. User got, and then user signed out. Okay, so there is no guarantee here that one or the other one will complete first. So at this point, we want to understand which one do we want to finish first. As it goes for user experience, we already got the skeletal loaders, and what the particular thing that we want to do is we want to get the user only once the session check is completed, right? Because the session monitor, that's primarily what it executes, a session check. Again, I'm just going to close this because I don't want to keep referring to the source code, but what we can do is we can blatantly ignore this event and re-trigger the logic that is run for it. So it's not the most efficient way. However, we basically do not disable the original logic. We kind of just duplicate it once on load, and we put it in front of our get user logic, okay? So the event itself, we are going to remove it. And if you're interested in what the solution would look like otherwise, is we have a little flag, and we create a watcher. So instead of dispatching our initialization this way, we create a watcher here, or essentially we would create a watcher in our store, where upon completion of this process, we set a variable that this process has been completed in our store, and the watcher watches that flag and it will re-execute this, okay? I think that is not necessarily needed. So let's go ahead and remove this. What we're going to do is in here, we're going to grab this auth and session. I don't get IntelliSense for the auth here, so I can't remember the function. So what we want is query session status. This is the function. So that is being executed. Again, if you look through the source code, you will know. So query session status, we can then call then, and then result. And I think if we F12 on this, take a look, what it's going to give us back is a session status. So we can have a look here, session state, sub, and SID. And well, let's go ahead and if we go back to our store, let's say session status. Let's console log session status. And for the other stuff, we are just going to comment this out real quick. Let's give this a control refresh and let's see what the session status comes back with. It doesn't seem like we got anything. Hold up, is this unreachable? Was that actually unreachable code from the new line? Okay, just let's try a refresh here. Okay, and there we go. So essentially now we get the same error. However, this error is now triggered in the correct place rather than just being thrown in the empty iframe on startup in a process to which we couldn't hook in. I'm appreciating this is probably hard to imagine if you didn't go through the source code of the application and you don't have a full understanding of what is happening inside the library. But understand that before, this error was happening outside of the code that we could touch, okay? And now we can touch it. We can touch it all we want, okay? So let's catch error, console log error. Let's go ahead, give this a Control F5. There is our response. We can give this a message, right? And we can refresh this. And there it is, login required. So whatever we want to do with this information, we can. So let's go ahead and say error message like that. And we'll say equals login required. We will use this auth to actually, let's just clean up here. And otherwise, if this is not really a problem, we can console log here. We'll still see what this is, but on then we can have another function. I don't know if we will need to pass anything here just yet. What we can do is we can reinitialize, reinitialize, I don't know, get the user again essentially. And then because that will return a promise as well, what we are going to have is the user here. So essentially we'll just repeat the function that we have commented out here. Okay, so there we go. And then finally, once pressing the wrong button, once everything is sorted, that's when we, and this is a string as well, commit that we're finished. However, obviously, if we go through this path and anywhere where this errors, the finish, because we are never setting the user. If we never hit this, the finish will set to false and authenticated will be false. So the UI should display the correct stuff. The things regarding the cleanup, let's go ahead and oidc-client. We'll just visit the wiki again and take a look at what it says. Because again, if you're going to be doing this is the exact procedure. You're going to go into methods, you are going to take a look at the functions, and what you're going to do is you're going to take a look, read through them, and what you're going to find is remove user. So returns a promise to remove from any storage the current authenticated user. I mean, sounds good to me. Sounds like the exact thing. So we can take a look at the user manager. We can take a look at the remove user and see that it's not returning anything. So let's go ahead to auth, and what we'll do is return this $auth and remove user, because I already forgot how to spell it, and we'll return this as a promise, right? Which then can finally be resolved to the load here, or finish loading, right? So user got, we no longer need that. Let's go through the correct flow and see what the session status outputs. If it's nothing too serious, then we can just move this to up there. So that's pretty much what we're going to do. So let's refresh. Login required. Session is cleared, so we no longer have the profile or anything there. Let's take a look at what it actually looks like in the local storage. So we still have a bunch of stuff. I don't know if there's probably, I can't remember, but I think there was a setting in terms of cleaning it up, but it doesn't matter. It's our client's browser. It's full of shit anyway. So we got a bunch of stuff. Login required. We signed out. Let's go ahead, sign back in. Test.desk.com. Password. Sign in. There we go. Close. There's our profile. Session state. Let's take a look at it. We have the sub as the user ID, SID, I can't remember exactly what it is, and session state. So it looks okay to me. I don't know what I'm gonna do with this session state. I think let's at least use it. Session status, if we have it, let's return, right? So then we don't need this bit, and the rest should stay the same. So Let's go ahead and give this a refresh, make sure that it's loading us, and it looks like it is. So, good. So we got through the hardest part, essentially. I appreciate if there are any questions around that part, make sure to leave a comment. Make sure to either reach out to me on Discord as well, because this part can be confusing. Do not DM me. Please make it public so other people can read it as well, and take some time in asking your question. Okay, so the particular problem that you're having, or the particular part that you don't understand, and I will try to help you as much as I can. So we got that part done. Let's go ahead and we're just gonna do a little bit of setup for the user profile. So just so you understand how I handled this part. So let's go ahead into, I'll just collapse everything, close everything, fresh slate, all that stuff. We're gonna go into models. Let's go ahead and add a new class, and we're gonna call it user, right? So the reason we're using a separate class instead of using the identity is because our identity server and their API are kind of this one thing right now, right? So they're a little bit fused, but slightly fused, okay? So if we ever do want to separate them, because the way that I've implemented it is if we go into startup, you can see that, again, add identity, all the functionality related to it is segregated in one function. It will essentially be taking out that part and changing the configuration of how we authorize here, right? So if we ever separate it, the identity and the user records go with the identity server. The authentication API stays with this user model, okay? And that's basically the thinking behind it. I doubt they will ever separate, but you never know, depending on if this project, how big this project will grow. So we got the user, we can see the base model, deleted, T key, string, and I mean, let's put a name here, right? The other stuff, we can fill it up as we're going along. Primarily what we want to do is we want to fit this to relationships and stuff like that. In the controllers, let's go ahead and create another class, user controller. We will call this controller base. Again, let's just go into any other controller, grab the attributes, pop them on here, and endpoint will be users. Okay, so for the public action result, so as our typical endpoints go, HTTP get, I don't think we won't do all users yet, because searching through all the users is a little bit like maybe later, but not right now. And then we will basically say first get me, we'll return okay, because we don't have any functionality around getting any of this stuff. I'm just setting up the scaffolding. So this is getting our particular user, okay? Next thing that we're gonna have is getting a particular user ID and ID. And for now, I think that will be it. One thing that we'll do is we'll just add it to our app DB context. The users. Okay. And as it goes for now, this will be it for this episode. Okay. So a little bit of styling, a little bit of bug fixing, and setting up work for the future episodes. Thank you very much for watching. Again, if you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comment section or reach out to me on the Discord server. All the links are in the description. Leave a like and subscribe if you did like it, if you're new here. And hopefully, I'll see you in the next episode.